All right, looking at your hip drive. Now, this is a movement pattern that should be incorporated with all the things you do throughout the day. So we're going to talk about it in the context of exercise, but this is how we're supposed to move. Through the hip joints, and what we tend to do is move through the spine a lot. So we're going to start phase one, so weeks 1, 2, and 3. We're going to work on developing that hip drive without moving through the spine. So you're going to go in tall kneeling. We're going to take your knees out wider than hip width, and your heels are going to be together. And I'll use a couple of anatomical landmarks. So the bottom of my ribs with my thumb, little finger on those front hip bones. And the biggest thing is we just don't want movement between those 2 points. Closer together, and we don't want them getting further apart. So keep those locked in. All of the movement's going to occur at the hip joint. You're going to hinge back. As you come up, press your heels together, drive your hips forward, and really squeeze your glutes. So hinge back. As I come up, I'm pressing my heels, squeezing my glutes, and there's no change between my ribs and hips. So that's going to groove that hip hinge pattern so that we can go into phase 2 and start putting a little bit of resistance into this. So now we're looking at weeks 4, 5, and 6. So you're going to need your bands with the handles, and we're going to step on the band in a couple of different ways, depending on the level of tension you're trying to achieve. It could be here. You may need to cross your band, or you can reduce the number of bands if it's too much tension. So the side view is going to give you what you need to see with this. I'm going to cross mine for a little more excitement. So from your upright position, I want you to pull your toes up off of the floor, and then you're driving your hips back. And remember, we're staying neutral here. We're not rounding the spine, we're not arching the spine. And then come right back up and squeeze my glutes. Hinge down, come up, squeeze glutes. From the standpoint of range of motion, your hands are not going to go below your knees. So once we get to knee height, that's as far as you go. Come up, good squeeze of the glutes, and then right back down. So an easy way to make sure that you are hinging properly, you can keep your toes pulled up the whole time. If you keep your toes pulled up, you're going to shift weight into your heel, and that's going to ensure a proper hip hinge. We're getting the glutes into the game and not just driving all of this through the low back or through the hamstring. All right, week 7, 8, 9. We're going to transition this to a single leg position. So we're going to go 1 foot on the band, and here, so even with all of this, I'll probably want a little more excitement out of it. So I'm going to cross, and I'm also going to choke down on the band. Other than that, and being on 1 foot, all of the rules apply. So you're going to shift into your heel, get your hips back behind you. Your hands are not going to go any lower than knee height. And then right back up. No movement between the ribs and hips. Big glute squeeze, right back down. So make sure your belly button points to the outside part or the middle of the foot that you're standing on. So if I'm on my left foot, I'm going to make sure my belly button stays there. The tendency will be to rotate the hips out. I want to make sure my belly button stays straight ahead. All right, and now weeks 10, 11, and 12. All we're going to do is offload you a little bit more to create a little more of a challenge with your hip. So instead of going under 1 foot and holding the bands in each hand, we're going to take both sides of the band and put it in the opposite hand. So standing on my right foot, all of the band goes in my left hand. Other than that, there's no change. My belly button's going to point to the middle of my foot or the outside of the foot, keeping my hips square. I'm not going to move between the ribs and hips. And I'm going to shift back onto my heel, get those hips behind me. If I need to practice that, I can pull my toes up, and then I'm going to have to get my heel back. And then same idea with range of motion. We don't want your hand going below your knee. So that's going to be each phase, working on the hip drive all the way up to single leg offloaded weight.